What is up, my friends, and welcome to another edition of the AEW Week in Review. I am your host, Mark Perry, editor of Pro Wrestling News Hub, covering pro wrestling and not sports entertainment. On this week's show, Janela trolls Cornette and more AEW news, some injury updates, etc., plus a recap of this week's Dynamite Dark and the latest TV ratings. So how do you get in touch with the show? You email podcast at Pro Wrestling News Hub with your MP3 or videos, or call 888-430-7692 extension 3. Remember, cutoff time for your submissions is 6 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. And please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We'll read it on the show. Question of the week, we got name your top 3 heels in AEW. We got that coming up. Mr. Fourth Row checks in as well, and we got a couple of your social media stuff. And, of course, questions about AEW Fantasy Wrestling. We'll get into that as well. Next week's question of the week. Of course, we're talking heels this week. Next week, we got to talk faces. So name your top 3 faces in AEW. Let us know for next week's show. Should be good. So, without further ado, folks, let's just get into the week that was AEW. All right, let's get into AEW Dark Results for September 29th. First up, SCU, Frankie Kazarian and Scorpio Sky defeated Ray Rosa and Ryzine. Penelope Ford defeated Alex Gracia in a women's match. Best Friends Chuck Taylor and Trent defeated Mbadu and BSHP King, making his debut. Lucha Express, Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus defeated Dark Order, Allen Angels 5, and Press 10, Vance 10. Gun Club, Billy Gunn and Austin Gunn defeated Sean Dean and Cesar Bonani. Taya Conte defeated Red Velvet in a women's match. After the match, Anna Jay enters the ring and hits a J kick on Red Velvet. Brandy Rhodes then rushes down and clears the ring. She checks on Velvet, so helping out Taya Conte, but we're not really sure what her deal is just yet. Chaos Project, Serpentico and Luther defeated Brian Pillman Jr. and Griff Garrison in a tag match. They get their first win together. Nyla Rose defeated Riche Chanel in a women's match. The Natural Nightmares, Dustin Rhodes and QT Marshall defeat the Dark Order of John Silver and Colt Cabana. And there is your matches for AEW Dark. AEW Dynamite Recap for September 30th. First up, we had Darby Allin versus Absolute Ricky Starks with tags winner. Darby Allin, I gave this one a 3.75. It was my elite match of the night, and then other matches came in place. But what a way to start the show. 2 up-and-coming stars in AEW going at it. This was a great match to kick things off, if not close to the match of the night. Next up, we get the announcement that Cody accepts the dog collar match against Mr. Brody Lee next week. FTR has a segment where Matt Jackson interrupts and kicks Tony Schiavone in the face. That wasn't very nice of him. SU had a segment where Sean Spears was there at the end. That was kind of interesting. Kind of looking down Scorpio Sky, which they kind of had it a little bit this week on AEW Dark. I like that some of the angles in AEW Dark bleed into AEW Dynamite. FTR and SCU. This was my elite match of the night. FTR, grade 4.00. This was a great match. Both teams were good. This FTR was good in this match. Not boring. I mean, SCU is a great team as well. And so who carried who, or they were both equals, but I really thought SCU looked great in this match. Maybe more than FTR. You know how I feel about them. But this still was a great match from both teams. I gave this a 4 rating, and it was the elite match of the night. The announcement of the 8-man tag tournament at AEW Full Gear, that's got Jungle Boy, Ray Phoenix, and Kenny Omega was announced, and Hangman Page wasn't too happy about that. The Demo God, Chris Jericho versus Isaiah Cassidy, another great match. Chris Jericho comes out with the win, no surprise there. It should be noted that Cassidy looked good too. And Private Party, they got a lot of good up-and-coming talent. And I was thinking during this match, I'm so glad that it's not like Chris Jericho against Sean Spears in their main event. It's like they're always mixing in these new guys with veteran guys and really bringing up this new talent of wrestlers. It was a good match. Kip Sabian and Miro had a segment in which they brought the Billy Pac-Man, who's like a video game legend, about this bachelor party thing in, which was kind of cool, interesting. Best Friends gets interrupted by FTR in a little backstage segment. Orange Cassidy versus Dark Order 10. This was meh. Orange Cassidy with the win. I gave it a 3, but this was a quick match. It was just a filler match, not a big one. We check in with MJF in the Inner Circle. Him and Jericho go back and forth. He bought some jackets for them. Will MJF join the Inner Circle? This little tease thing seems to be kind of interesting. We'll see where this goes. Dr. Britt Baker versus Red Velvet. Great to see Dr. Britt Baker back. This one I gave it 2.50 stars. Grade. I don't know what we'll call them. I thought it was great for Britt Baker to be back. I thought Red Velvet looked good too. They both looked good, and it was a good match, and it was great to see them back. Lots of holds in it, not a lot of really big moves because Britt Baker just came off an injury. But for what it was worth, I thought Dr. Britt Baker's back, and I'm glad that she is back because the women's division needs her. And this was a good match for her to come back with. I think they both did well. Then we had the final match, Jon Moxley versus The Butcher. This was probably this match of the night. Jon Moxley was the winner. I gave this a 2.50. Take out Eddie Kingston's promo in the beginning, and this thing was kind of a snooze fest. I can always tell if I'm not really that into it when checking my phone or other things. And this match definitely, I thought the show started off with a bang. The first hour was strong, and then it just started to kind of fade that second hour. And I was still hooked in all the way through, wanting to see who he was going to fight. I thought it may have been Brian Cage, and then I saw Lucha Brothers out there, and I was like, ooh, Rey Fenix, that would be a good one, but they went with the Butcher. I think that was a good choice. I probably would have liked to see the Blade in there over the Butcher, but still, it is what it is, and it was a good show, and I'm excited about next week's show. Next week's card for AEW, the special Chris Jericho 30th anniversary special that will be next week. We're getting, first up, Chris Jericho and Jake Hager versus Luther and Serpentico. This match was made after Jericho and Luther got into it during his match with Isaiah Cassidy on Dynamite. Jericho and Hager later attacked both Luther and Serpentico after the end of the match. We all know Jericho and Luther has a long history and friendship. They're like best friends, so it's not surprising to have his 30th anniversary, have him and Hager go against Luther and Serpentico. No shocker there. Brian Cage versus Will Hobbs, they both brawled during their match between Ricky Starks and Darby Allin. I was like, oh, okay, we're going to have the big guys go at it. So next week we'll get to see Will Hobbs take on Brian Cage. Will Hobbs hitting the rocket ship as far as push goes. And then finally, the dog collar match, Mr. Brody Lee versus Cody Rhodes. This was made after the whole in-ring segment with Cody, and he accepts, and they had a big brawl, and they had to be pulled apart. And then Anna Jay and Brandy Rhodes got into it as well. That's it so far that we know of. This will be a live show next week, so there'll be more matches to come. Ratings for AEW and NXT are in. So this is for the Wednesday, September 30th edition of AEW Dynamite. They were released, and a report by Showbuzz Daily has AEW finishing 12th overall for the night. Dynamite drew 866,000 viewers, slightly up from last week's 835,000 viewers. They finished 9th overall last week. Dynamite was taped this week at Daly's Place in Jacksonville. Featured Ricky Starks versus Darby Allin and Jon Moxley versus a mystery opponent picked by Eddie Kingston. The mystery opponent turned out to be The Butcher, which was probably the worst match of the evening. NXT drew 732,000 viewers, up from last week's 696,000 viewers. It finished 50th. That's right, 50th overall. Last week they finished 38th. The show featured Johnny Gargano and Candice LeRae versus NXT North American Champion Damian Priest and NXT Women's Champion Leo Shira. The total combined wrestling audience from both shows was up to 1.598 million viewers. It was 1.531 million total viewers last week. Based on the ratings, the MLB playoffs dominated with spots in 7 of the top 15 shows. 6 news shows finished in the top 15. South Park
was your winner of the night by a big margin. Then it was the Major League playoffs. They took the next 2 spots, then 2 Fox News shows coming in 4th and 5th to round out your top 5. In the key 50-plus demo, AEW was 0.34, the lowest of the top 25 shows. The 26 shows were a little bit lower. NXT was, for the record, 0.37. And if you watch BTE being the elite, you know what I'm talking about with this 50-plus. For the night, the fact that wrestling viewers went up with the Major League Baseball playoffs and a South Park episode actually to me seems pretty strong numbers, all things considered, between the debate that happened the day before, Major League Baseball, a sporting event, and it's the playoffs, that the fact that the total combined wrestling audience went up and both shows went up in the ratings, I think was a great sign, and it shows how hardcore wrestling fans are.
Looks like Joey Janela is trolling Jim Cornette a little bit. So one of Elite Wrestling's, AEW Wrestling's most unorthodox and unique stars, Joey Janela, recently took to Twitter and said that he's been given permission to use the name, the new Midnight Express, for his tag team with Sonny Kiss. He would then post a graphic of himself and Sonny with Midnight Express written below it. The first and original legendary Midnight Express had Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose as team members. The second incarnation of the legendary Midnight Express would then consist of Dennis Condrey, Bobby Eaton, Stan Lane, and Jim Cornette as the manager. This past August 18th, Cornette, Condrey, Eaton, and Lane filed the trademark Midnight Express. Shortly after Janela's tweet, Cornette's lawyer, Stephen P. New, reportedly issued a cease and desist to AEW saying, quote, "We just trademarked that name a few months ago. Call Mega now." This is reportedly Jim Cornette's lawyer calling out to AEW's chief legal counsel, Mega Parak. No word yet on if AEW actually plans to use the Midnight Express name, but it's kind of funny, this exchange, and clearly I think Joey Janela is just trolling them. First he says, "It's great me and Sonny Kiss got permission to go under the new Midnight Express." He does a little laughing because the lawyer is getting all upset. And then he says, "Don't you have some ambulances to chase, little man?" And then Sonny Kiss posted, "Enjoy this picture of the bad boy and I as you get ready for AEW Dark." And then Avalanche TV at Jim Cornette, "If AEW let Sonny Kiss and Joey Janela use the name, the new Midnight Express, I'm not watching AEW no more. It's crazy because I started back watching wrestling again because of AEW. I don't want to turn away." Which, of course, Janela finds it funny. Then he says on Twitter, "Midnight Express in action, tune in." Which of course, this Steve New says, "Cease and desist just sent to her, all good." Which again, he's just trolling. And then he says, "LMFAOOO, original little man, you're legit 5'2" and look like a bloated waterlogged corpse, or if William Shatner was inbred West Virginia little mountain creature." Clearly he's just trolling, but still some pretty funny stuff from Janela. An update on Chris Statlander from her ACL injury. Back in June, AEW women's star Chris Statlander tore her ACL and is reportedly expected to be out of ring action for quite some time. According to reports, Statlander's surgery to repair her damaged ACL was successful. But there is still a long way to go before she's making an in-ring return. Statlander recently took to her Instagram account and provided an update on her injury as well as her road to recovery. Statlander revealed a number of rehab exercises she has been doing to get back in ring shape. Said that it's been a little over 8 weeks after undergoing surgery and that her leg is still tiny as hell, but they are making progress and there is still a long way to go. This is what she said, quote, "Here's some road to recovery stuff for you. A little over 8 weeks post-surgery and my leg is still tiny as hell, but we're making progress. Still a long way to go though. Here's a bundle of rehab exercises I've been doing to strengthen my leg along with mobility, and I've officially mastered single leg jump rope on my good leg, obviously. Hashtag, a bunch of hashtags, and you can check out her video." No word on when Statlander will return. Probably won't be till mid-2021. AEW World Tag Team Champions FTR, Cash Wheeler and Dax Harwood, were recently guests on Push Podcast to talk about a number of topics, which include their interest in facing the Impact World Tag Team Champions, the Motor City Machine Guns, Alex Shelley and Chris Sabian, two of my favorite tag team guys, after it was mentioned by a fan on Twitter about how the two teams should face off. FTR also talked about approaching AEW President and CEO Tony Khan about making the massive match happen. This is what FTR said. Just today, there was a tweet about us and the Motor City Machine Guns, and we got all those all the time. But today I made mention it to Tony Khan, so I've spoken about it. I would love to work with them. I mean, if we're going to go down as the greatest tag team of all time, we need to work with the greatest, and they are one of the greatest, and we need to beat them to be the greatest. Would you like to see Motor City Machine Guns against FTR? I would. And of course, I would like to see FTR lose to Motor City Machine Guns. Miro's changing his finishing moves name and dropped some other moves. So former WWE superstar Rusev, now known as Miro, made his AEW ring debut a couple weeks ago with Kip Sabian in a tag team match where Sabian and Miro beat Kiss and Janela via submission with Miro's Game Over submission. Dave Metzler indicated on a recent edition of the Wrestling Observer newsletter that aside from Miro changing the name of his finishing maneuver from the Accolade to Game Over, Miro also dropped the name Machka Kick, which he typically uses as a setup before applying the submission. Metzler said that Miro's signature super kick no longer has a specific name at this moment. How about we call it the Mark Kick or the Pro Wrestling News Hub Kick? That would be good. Despite there being no mention of WWE owning or trademarking the term Machka or Machka Kick, Metzler noted that WWE will be pissed off if Miro uses those terms or in AEW. The term Machka was reportedly trademarked a long time ago to a restaurant service company, and while the term Machka Kick reportedly is not owned or trademarked by anyone yet, this is according to just the trademarks. Now, Miro mentioned a number of years ago that Machka, which means crush, in his native language of Bulgarian, was a catchphrase or term he started and used after watching the movie Rocky IV with his wife, Lana. Former AEW star Sadie Gibbs, recently a guest on Vicky Guerrero's Excuse Me podcast, talked about a number of topics, including how she was planning to move to the United States due to her work in AEW, among other things prior to, of course, COVID, the pandemic, etc. And that was the main reason why she couldn't travel due to the travel restrictions. Here's what she said, quote, I was planning on moving out. My flight was booked on March 25th. My suitcases were packed and ready. Then it all happened on the 20th. And I thought maybe I wasn't meant to go at this time. It was within 5 days. I couldn't believe it. It's gutting, but I don't like to be in the negative headspace where I'm dwelling on everything and feeling sorry for myself because I'm lucky these opportunities came into my life. I just have to take what I can from it and keep going. Gibbs first appeared in the 2019 All Out pay-per-view, then worked a number of episodes of Dark, but has never made an appearance or even competed on Dynamite. Gibbs was eventually released by AEW back in August. Maybe we'll see her again when the travel restrictions end, but man, she was ready to move to the U.S. to be part of AEW, and then you know what happened. Screwed everybody. Previously reported that AEW recently announced the signing of Serena Deeb to the company, who earlier this month made her in-ring debut against NWA Women's World Champion Thunder Rosa in a women's division singles match. Deeb was then scheduled to be part of the next NWA UWN Prime Time Live pay-per-view as she was set to face Allison Kay in a one-on-one match, but now is being replaced by Nicole Savoy as she took to Twitter to announce that she will be self-quarantining for 10 days after coming in contact with someone who later tested positive for COVID-19. This is what she said, quote, Earlier this week, I came in contact with an individual who later tested positive for COVID-19. I'm taking extra precautions and will be self-quarantining for 10 days. Due to this, I unfortunately have to postpone the match at Primetime Live next week with Allison Kay. I offer my utmost apologies for this. This is a serious matter, and the health and safety of everyone involved always comes first. And you can check out NWA's tweet below along with Serena Deeb's announcement. So it's a shame. Was this involved with this person that she was in contact with? Was an AEW person, but we don't know because we know that Lance Archer and Ben Carter caught something after they were with AEW. So who knows what's going on, but I would not be surprised if we get more of these in the months to come. Did you know you can get all the latest AEW news right from your phone? That's right, we're excited to announce the Pro Wrestling News Hub app. That's right, and it's free. You can get it for your iPhone. You can get it for your Google Android phone. And they're both free. You get all our breaking AEW news, information from Pro Wrestling News Hub right from your phone. You can just visit the Apple Store or the Google Play Store. What do you get? You get the latest news from Pro Wrestling News Hub. You get push notifications when a new post or story comes out. You get our podcast on the phone. You can leave us a review on iTunes, links to our social media, and so much more. All you have to do is, if you have an iPhone, go to the iTunes store and just look up Pro Wrestling News Hub and download it. Just type in AEW News. You can get our phone app, and guess it is free, my friends. It's free. So head over. You get all the latest news right from your phone, from your friends from Pro Wrestling News Hub, whether you have an iPhone or an Android. And it's best of all, it's free. All right, let's get to our social media quickly this week. We had a question out there. Name your top 3 heels in AEW. We gave you some options like Jericho, Lance Archer, Sammy Guevara, MJF, Brody Lee, amongst others. Miro says FTR, Eddie Kingston, CM Punk. Okay, CM Punk is not in AEW, but okay. Gray says, my top 3 heels are the following: MJF, Chris Jericho, Brody Lee. I would say that at this current juncture, it's probably the right one. KM Farham says Chris Jericho, Mr. Brody Lee, and MJF. Got a little different. Jericho is probably the top heel. I would agree with that. Those 3 guys are basically it. Onto the Twitter at Keely Bowden. When talking about, we had a fun little picture about MJF and Chris Jericho, a Step Brothers movie. Somebody put a meme out there, and we said, would you buy tickets to see Step Brothers starring MJF and Chris Jericho? Keelan Broden says yes. We put out there after AEW Dynamite, we said it's always the best night of wrestling. TKO Wrestling _TKO says 95% of the time. And at Bliss00 Alexa says no, at WWE NXT is. Okay. Fine. On to the email. We got an email from William. It says, thank you for devoting your podcast to AEW. I am like you. I decided to only watch AEW right now. That's my man right there. I just saw your podcast, listened to the latest episode, downloaded the mobile app, and then started from the beginning of your AEW show. Cool. Thank you very much. I'm interested in the fantasy league for AEW. Have you started it? How can I be a part of it? Also, I noticed the roster part of the app is not completed yet. What are your plans with that? Thank you, William, checking in. Thank you, William, for the email. Yes, we're right in the middle of building our AEW fantasy app right now. I can give you the latest update is I have it set up so that you could sign up. I have it set up that you could set up a draft. I actually went through and drafted AEW wrestlers. I'm still trying to figure out the rules, this, that, and the other thing. And right now it's basically setting the lineup. And then that's where I'm at right now, is basically setting the lineup and adding the results. The results part, that's 80% done. And now it's just setting your lineup. And I'd hope, my goal, knock on wood,
is to have something in play, some kind of beta test in November. So the idea is that you'll get point, and I want feedback, and that's going to be the thing that's going to make this work, is feedback from you guys. What I want is basically the AEW Fantasy site is going to be a quarterly thing. So every quarter, there's a new season, quote unquote. And so after each, this way you get 4 times during the year to redraft your league. We'll probably do 6 wrestlers. You would be in your starting lineup. And then if they appear on Dark and Dynamite, you get points for it, that kind of thing. And if they win a match, you get more points. That's kind of how it's going to work right now. And then, of course, then you have the pay-per-view and then you redraft. So unlike pro football, where you draft once a year and then that's it, you'll get to draft 4 times a year, which I think makes it fun too. I'm not going to get into, how many drop kicks did this person have? Because you got to understand with fantasy football, I mean, for the running back, it's touchdowns, yards, and that's it. For receivers, it's yards and touchdowns. For a quarterback, it's completions, yards, touchdowns. I mean, there's only really 3 data points or 2 data points. So why do we have to make it complicated? And it makes watching the shows fun, because just think of I was thinking this when Will Hobbs is getting his push. Just think if you drafted in your league and you kept him, Will Hobbs, just to get those points for Dark, and now all of a sudden he becomes a guy that's appearing on Dynamite. You got a guy in there that's a big hit. Or like a Ben Carter, you picked him up and he gets you some points. So it makes it really interesting. And we'll see. We're just going to kind of play with it. But we're hoping to have some type of beta test in November to get out there. So we got a month to go. I don't know if we'll hit that mark. It's not as complicated, but there's still complications. It's just having time to do it. But I appreciate William checking in. Super fan. We like to thank you. But yes, we will have AEW Fantasy. I'm fine with it. If we have 3 leagues, I'm good with that. I don't need, I don't think this is going to be huge. We're going to have 20,000 leagues in there, like pro football or even the XFL, when that comes around. I think fans will kind of work on it together, and that's the difference between Yahoo and ESPN and whatever. You get to work directly with me, and you're like, hey, could it be cool to do this? Hey, it would be awesome if we could do a mock drafts on the site. Sure, okay, I'll put it in there. Because what happened is in my past with Impact Wrestling and all wrestling sites that I ran, people were asking me for fantasy wrestling forever, and I just ignore them. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. It's too much work. And then it's a lot of work for WWE shows because there's freaking 20,000 shows on. But in this instance, I think it will work. And so finally, I'm like, hey, what's going to separate Pro Wrestling News Hub from everybody else? It's going to be having its own fantasy wrestling app. Because so far as I've seen, you have to pay for it, and there's only one, and this one will be for free. And speaking for free, we get to check in with our pal, Mr. Fourth Row.
It's a go there for another phone call there from Mr. Fourth Row. Hey, AEW Week in Review and Mr. Mark. So the question that's been posed to us for this week, talking about Heels. And yeah, we're not talking about AEW Heels. That is the group that AEW has created for women who like wrestling. Just a sidebar there. I think they should have, just because of the history of what a heel and a face is in the wrestling industry, they should have made a different name on that, because people could get confused. But anyways, about some of our faces now turning heels and things of that nature, I'm kind of very confused about it because AEW is a little bit of a different animal than the other companies out there in the world, and AEW has always been about bringing the best, the elite, as the saying goes, to their company and putting them in there. So, because I remember there's just been many times that you have watched matches, at least I have, that even the heels have gotten cheers versus jeers when in their matches because people love the wrestling. That's what the AEW is about. It's about the wrestling, and as you say, Mr. Mark, not the sports entertainment. So it's going to probably, in a way, fall a little flat, not take probably as much hold as it would, say, in other companies, of some of these people turning heels from faces, but we'll see. And, the thing is, as long as there's a great storyline, I think everybody will be okay. But heck, what do I know? I'm just sitting in the fourth row. And speaking of that, that is my view, not from the cheap seats, not from the most expensive seats, but from the fourth row.
All right. Well, we'd like to thank Mr. Fourth Row checking in. We'd like to thank you guys for checking in as well. Remember, question for next week: name your top 3 faces. That's top 3 faces in AEW. And if you want to be part of the show, email podcast@prowrestlingnewshub.com or call 888-430-7692 extension 3. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, especially YouTube. Give us a like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you really like the show. It helps us spread the word about AEW and our show. Listen to us anywhere you get podcasts, of course, Spotify, Google, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, all that good jazz. For show notes, you can go to prowrestlingnewshub.com/AEW-podcast to find this show and join us on our Discord. We have a link to that in the show notes. Hopefully everybody stays safe out there. Looking forward to next week's show with the dog collar and all sorts of stuff. I assume ratings will still be pretty good. And join the fun. I'll be on Twitter always. We're always on Twitter during the show, so hang out with us. So thanks for listening. Mahalo. Stay safe out there. Put your mask on. God bless. And I will see you all later.